name's Andrew and welcome back to Deep Cut. This channel is dedicated to discussing men's fashion topics that have been running through my mind. If you consider yourself a fashion enthusiast, please consider subscribing and joining the conversation in the comments section. For the last few months, we've been teased of an upcoming special project from the co-founders of Vetements. It felt like there was a decent amount of hype around the announcement, which I think there was good reason for. Vetements' rise in popularity through the mid-2010s was meteoric, and their clothes were seen everywhere. Fashion weeks, social media, and on a heap of celebrities. The timing of Vetements' launch was perfect, as it was also the height of meme culture. The iconic DHL tees, their ironic, sarcastic, and often polarizing takes on pop culture and normal clothes were a breath of fresh air at the time. Through all of their success, Vetements was also met with a lot of criticism from fashion gatekeepers and non-fashion people alike. This is completely normal for an up-and-coming brand, and especially one that was as prominent as Vetements. A lot of people saw their designs as being too normal or extremely overpriced for what they were. I do agree with the latter to a certain degree, since some of the most prominent designs were simply oversized logo tees. However, Vetements is a luxury brand, and their price points aren't dissimilar to other brands in the space. I feel like Vetements' popularity has fallen off in the past few years though. Probably because they reached saturation point, and I think a lot of people became tired of the same formula each season. Something else that I've been thinking about is that there seems to be a clear shift happening across the industry at the moment. Obviously, the pandemic has caused a lot of designers, brands, and companies to rethink their strategies, and we're seeing many collections having thematic changes in response to the global mood. Some brands have also adjusted the number and frequency of new collections that they're releasing, as well as the method in which they're released to the market. The industry has also been discussing the impacts of the Gen Z consumer for the last 5 years or so. I think that over the next year especially, this group of consumers will be truly starting to come of age and affect the sales of luxury brands, as more and more younger consumers will be buying into these brands since they'll be finishing their degrees and entering the workforce, therefore having enough income to be able to afford to buy into these brands more. I want to make it clear that I'm not part of the Gen Z consumer group, but I do feel that I have a reasonable understanding of what makes them unique compared to the generations that came before them. I've seen a lot of reports come out over the last half a decade trying to break down the Gen Z customer. They try to decipher what makes them different, especially compared to millennials. What products will they want to buy? What do brands need to do to appeal to these consumers? And honestly, I find the vast majority of these studies laughable. While there's usually a grain of truth to be found in them, what I think they fail to realize is that younger people are becoming harder for large companies to profile than ever before. These studies and reports are conducted and written by people who aren't part of the Gen Z consumer group, since this group has only recently entered the workforce. Therefore, it's millennials and Gen X who are trying their best at deciphering what goes on in the minds of Gen Z, but they consistently fail to realize what I think is the biggest difference between Gen Z and the rest. And that is, most of these two generations simply can't and won't ever be able to relate and truly empathize with Gen Z, because Gen Z is the first to grow up with the internet being widely available their entire lives. What does this mean exactly? They've been exposed to such a variety of influences and information sources that it's practically impossible to quantify. Gen Z are culture chameleons that change colour faster than any study can be conducted and in many ways can't be traced. Big brands think that they can market their way into this consumer group by overloading their social feeds with sponsored products and ads, but these consumers have been dealing with this for their entire lives. They're finding ways of subverting this blatant extortion that brands have been conducting on Gen X and millennials for over a decade now, and they're struggling to keep up. How does this have anything to do with Vetements or their new secret project? I think a big reason why Vetements and many other luxury brands have fallen in popularity over the last few years is because they don't quite get their new customer group. This brand was built on nostalgia and irony that younger people simply never experienced and therefore can't relate to. Not only that, but I believe that they're sick of being marketed to and want realness that they've been denied for their whole lives. VTMNTS is the name of the new secret project label that was finally unveiled this week, and the name alone is cringeworthy. Supposedly pronounced VTMNTS, but I doubt that this will translate in the long term and will read instead as Vetements by Vetements. Visually, the name looks like every brand from the early to mid 2010s who decided that vows weren't worth it. Unfortunately, I don't think enough time has passed for this trend to come back in vogue, so it's like pulling the stitches from a wound that hasn't healed yet. The collection is titled XXX, and I think that they wanted to title it Untitled, but thought that the young people might feel that titling things as Untitled is a bit played out. Reading the major fashion publications' articles on this collection, it seems that most are just regurgitating the same old rhetoric. It's a shame that none aside from High Snobiety were even the least bit critical about this collection. It just goes to show the sad state of fashion journalism, where everyone is so neutral/positive that it hurts. The comments section of the High Fashion Talk Facebook page tells a very different story, and I agree with a lot of the takes here. It looks like 2018. That's just Vetements. It looks like how fast fashion copied Vetements and Gosha in 2018. Which you might consider is the point, but again, I don't think that enough time has passed to make it ironic or seem like social commentary. Instead, it comes off like they're trying to double dip on Vetements' previous success. The collection itself is fine. It's what you might expect, but it doesn't bring anything new to the table. It's pretty much a diffusion line, but the prices will probably only be marginally lower than the main line, and I honestly don't know why they needed to keep this a secret. A lot of people were hoping for a new brand that might shake things up like Vetements did in the mid-2010s, but unfortunately, I think that was just wishful thinking. VTMNTS claims that the brand will be used to offer mentorships, financial aid, and other initiatives. I'm assuming that this is intended for young, up-and-coming creators, but they haven't elaborated on how any of this will become a reality, and the cynic in me sees this more of a way of getting fresh ideas from the consumers that they're struggling to cater to for as little investment as possible. There are a few pieces in this collection that reference various pronouns, which is obvious commentary around inclusivity and identity social issues that are prevalent today. But I struggle to understand how the inclusion of these basic pieces is anything more than the ticking of a metaphorical box to try and appeal to a younger audience. In no way does a brand try and push the conversation forward or offer anything to support people who are struggling with these issues in their own lives. Nor have they provided any additional context around the pieces in the commentary that I've seen published around this collection. This goes for the other identifiable differences between Vetements and this new VTMNTS collection. The near absence of logos, jeans, hoodies and sneakers, the inclusion of pearls and chain jewellery, the barcode logo supposedly being commentary around the mundane, identity and consumerism. It looks like someone read the textbook definition of what Gen Z consumers want. Anyway, I feel like I've ranted enough, and this is obviously not so much a review on the collection like what I set out to do. It's become more of a commentary on the state of luxury fashion at the moment, and I honestly can't wait for a new wave of young brands to break through. My favourite comment of all from the High Fashion Talk comments is, "I'm tired." I'm tired of not just luxury fashion, but most big companies trying to cash in on younger consumers, masking their overproduction with a faux corporate responsibility project or some sort of political message that they don't actually do anything with. If you managed to make it this far, please consider subscribing, dropping a like and a comment.